You're now listening to Directing Magic with your host, Marquette Jones.
Hello, and welcome back to the Directing Magic podcast. This is your host, Marquette Jones, and I am here today with a wonderful film director. Her name is Zara Hayes, and her new film is called POMS, P-O-M-S, starring Diane Keaton. Thank you so much for being here, Zara. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Can you tell everyone what the movie is about?
Sure. It's about a woman in her 70s, played by Diane Keaton, who at the start of the movie has decided to sell all of her things and move herself into a retirement community in Georgia. So she travels down south. She's going there with the intention of kind of shutting off, and she says she's going there to die, which is essentially what she is doing. We find out that she's very sick. She arrives at the community. Her next door neighbor, played by Jackie Weaver, refuses to let her disappear and refuses to let her kind of coil up. And she ends up essentially sort of sparking this idea within Diane's characters to set up a cheerleading team for the women at the retirement community. And together they form the first cheerleading squad for older women at this retirement community.
And how did the story come to you?
Well, it's an interesting one because my background is in documentary. Growing up in England, cheerleading is not something that we really had back then. It's a very American thing. And so I've always been interested in cheerleading because I was a dancer when I was younger, and I'm interested in the sport of it and the athleticism of it and everything. But as I got older and developed more of a kind of feminist conscience, let's say, I kind of came to realize that there is some sort of complex, problematic gender symbolism going on there with cheerleading. And, you know, it's the ultimate female archetype really in a way. And it's seen as like the pinnacle in many ways of kind of femininity or whatever at high school, especially back when these women would have been doing it, by the way. But it's also like the symbolism of it is a bit complex, right? Because it's amazing what they're doing physically, but they're doing it, you know, essentially to support and decorate the main attraction, which is the sports team. So I kind of I've had a funny relationship with it. And I was thinking about making a documentary about all of this and about the institution of cheerleading. And then the truth of the matter is I came across these photographs of these real women in Arizona who were at a retirement community who had set up a cheerleading team for older women. And I was completely taken aback by it. And I actually thought the images looked incredibly empowering, and the women looked like they were having a great time. Actually, it challenged my whole perception. So I contacted them and I thought, I'm going to make a documentary about this because this is really interesting. You know, what is this saying about women of a certain age and everything? And then as I kind of looked into it further, I found out that this is actually a phenomenon across the country. It's not just in one place. There are a number of women in later life who are cheerleading.
Yeah, I didn't realize that from the movie.
Yeah. So it's I didn't make this thing up, and I think if I'd made it up, I'd feel differently about it. But because it's a real thing, and it's a real thing that many, many women are deriving kind of joy and pride and all those things from across the whole country, and actually in the wider world there's actually a Japanese senior cheerleading team as well.
Wow.
and I just sort of thought this story should be told because it says something about women and about older women and about women's place in society and how that's changed and is changing. And more than anything, it's kind of joyful, and it's dancing and movement and being free with your bodies. And you know, I want to kind of see women on screen moving in this way, and kind of I want to honor it in that way. And I kind of decided that it was better as a movie, as a fictional narrative than as a documentary, because I could combine a lot of the observations that I'd had from speaking to all these different teams. And also it could have a scale that I wanted for it, because I felt like it should be recognized.
And do you think that cheerleading has changed in terms of what it says about women who participate in it now versus 20 or 30 years ago?
Oh, it's interesting because I focused on the fact that these women who I ended up speaking to, actually the vast majority of them had not been cheerleaders at high school, and it was something that they were coming to later in life, either because they'd not been able to do it, they'd been excluded from it for whatever reason. They had always wanted to do it but hadn't had the confidence. And you know, if you were young women at high school in the 60s or 70s, sport, women's sport wasn't as advanced as it is now, and it wasn't as far along. And so if you wanted to participate in something and be part of a team, this was it, that's what you could do. And so people have incredibly fond memories of cheerleading at high school, and people also have these very strong associations with it if they were excluded from it or whatever. So for me, it was kind of honoring that. And then I didn't so much look into what the symbolism of it is now, but I certainly know from my experience of making it and from the people that have watched it and the reactions that we're getting, that it's still clearly a very charged subject for people, and it still clearly is like, the archetype and the image that a lot of women are kind of measured against.
What has been one of the most surprising responses to the film?
Gosh, we've had really we're right in the middle of it, but there's something I think about seeing women of a certain age doing this that is provoking people in one way or the other. Like, it seems to be quite polarizing, the response that we're getting. And I'm kind of intrigued by that and not afraid of that. And I sort of knew that was going to happen, because I made this documentary a few years ago called The Battle of the Sexes, which was about Billie Jean King and her tennis victory over Bobby Riggs in the 70s, and was really about the women's tennis movement. And I always remember her saying this thing, which was that in the 70s, for women to have muscles and to be doing something physical and sweating on television in itself was the revolution. Like, we were going through the second wave feminist movement at the time in the 70s, but like they were embodying it. And it kind of like some of the comments that people would level against Billie Jean King and her contemporaries when they were playing tennis about how it's embarrassing for a woman to be doing this, and it's shameful in some way, and she's going against some sort of natural order that people think that's been ordained by this arbitrary system that we're all part of. And she said, that was a revolution, and Gloria Steinem kind of backed that up. And I sort of always felt like within this idea of older women cheerleading, there was something similarly like, I don't want to overstate it, but there's something kind of provocative or rebellious about it, because you're taking this kind of stereotype that's we've been culturally sort of programmed to think it's for a certain type of young woman, and then you're saying, hey, guess what, I'm going to do it on my own terms, and I don't need your approval, and I don't need you to find it beautiful, because I'm doing it because I think it's beautiful. And that is going to get people's backs up. And I think that's what's happened with some of the response to seeing the movie. We've had people saying things like, if you're going to do a cheerleading movie, and make them actually good at cheerleading or whatever, which is completely missing, our intention, which was that we wanted to be authentic and genuine to what these women can and are prepared to do and are able to do. And so with all of our actors, we didn't cast dancers. We just, we worked to find movement that felt authentic to who these women were, given their age and everything. And I didn't want to kind of use the trickery of cinema. I didn't want to have body doubles, and I didn't want to shoot it in a way that kind of, made it feel like, because that wasn't the point. It's the emotional victory of doing it. Right. So that's been the most surprising response to me, because people have sort of said things like it's, and I knew this would happen, that it's kind of anti-feminist, or it's kind of humiliating or demeaning for these women to be doing this. And the fact of the matter is, I think the opposite is true. And I came to it through I went through that process of initially thinking like, oh God, of all the things that you could do, why cheerleading? What does that say about where we're at? But the fact is, it doesn't really matter, like the route that got you there. Mm-hmm. If you've internalized the sort of, I think anyway, an image that, for whatever reason, at a certain point in your life, you're in your 70s and kids have grown up, and you think that's what I want to do with my life. That's what I think, I would find that fun. And in the process, you get to keep fit, meet friends, meet different types of women who you wouldn't have been necessarily friends with, and do something active and show your body as an older woman. I think that's really empowering, actually. Yeah.
What I noticed was the fact that you don't shy away from the sexuality of these older women. Was that something that you put in there intentionally, or is it just kind of a byproduct of, senior living?
No, it kind of fits in with this whole idea of kind of using, being in control of your body and using your body and having finding a way to kind of do that. And that's the fine line to tread, sort of, the very fact of the matter is, that these retirement communities often have like really sky high rates of STDs and stuff. And we could have really gone there with the sort of the humor in this with that. But I didn't want to kind of make that a main part of the narrative just for the sake of it, because I think you can get into a kind of making fun of or a spectacle kind of, and but at the same time, I wanted to honor the fact that there are really like sex positive, like, body positive kind of people at this stage in life who kind of, feel very comfortable in who they are and what they want and stuff. So I did want to make that part of it. Yeah, for sure. And I thought it was important it goes back to the whole thing of like, I think women, when they get to a certain age, are told like, you should be invisible and silent. And actually not just that, like the things that you like and the things that you want to do are kind of not as kind of sophisticated or meaningful as that what the mainstream wants. And I just don't believe that. I think there's like this whole there are these generations of these amazing women, 55 plus, who are kind of lived through major social changes and have had like, they've lived through the sort of 20th century's big upheavals, and they're doing their own thing. And who are we to say that it's kind of what's right or wrong, So that was something that I felt was really important. Yeah. In terms of putting it all together.
And when you thought about drawing that line and staying on the right side of the line between making fun of these women or laughing at them versus laughing with them for the purpose of comedy, like what was your litmus test for yourself as you were trying to make a comedy but not make fun of?
Yeah. Well, it was really working with the actors. And the incredible cast that we have all are of that age, and authentically so. And, very much would point out if anything felt uncomfortable at any point. And that was a complete open forum. But also working with the community. We filmed in a real retirement community, and we did a lot of research and with people. The interesting thing is that, like, again, I feel like the responses we're getting generally from the audience that it was intended for are incredibly positive. I feel like we've achieved that aim through the process that we went through, but it's always a subjective thing, of course, when it comes to humor, isn't it?
Always.
Yeah.
And I think it's like getting harder and harder to know like what is the line that you can't cross or should cross or whatever.
Yeah.
I personally thought it was super funny, and I never felt like you crossed the line that was too far or anything like that. But my interest in comedy personally, I always wonder, like, how do you know when you've gone just far enough?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. And I think that it's who it's made for as much as anything. I think that's what you've got to look at, because, there are some people who find those kind of jokes like a bit uncomfortable, but it sort of says more about like where they're at, what preconceptions they're bringing to the table about what's kind of considered safe or appropriate or not appropriate. We had a couple of test screenings with our target audience, actually. And
who's your target audience?
It's really women over the age of 45. I mean, of course, everyone's target audience is to bring in all kinds of people and people who wouldn't necessarily be the obvious candidates. And I've seen great reactions to this film from like men in their 20s, actually, because I think it makes them think about their mums. We didn't want it to also be like anti-man, this movie, although it's very much like a women's movie. We didn't want anti-man.
How did it start? Like, you've talked to me and probably to a bunch of other people about the transition from being a documentary filmmaker to this being your first feature film. But in terms of, like, you got the idea for it and then got your investment money, got the movie made with Diane, Keaton and Pam Grier and this wonderful cast.
There really haven't been many films about older people, and certainly not ones that tried to combine comedy with drama. My thing is that I want to make the things that I want to make, and I got to make something that I really do, I really do feel like, it's not perfect, and there are lots of things I would change, and there are lots of things that were very frustrating, and as every director, I'm sure, ever that you interview has told you. But overall, the kind of heart of it and the message of it and what it does, I'm really proud that that's in cinemas. And so, all the kind of stuff along the way, I don't really know the answer to that, because is it better to kind of, not made something through that fear or kept something really small that you can control it, but then doesn't ever reach the audience. You can't make a movie that's going to be distributed widely across the world without, finding partners who have like very strong commercial interests. And the interesting thing is that the movie is connecting with people, and it's getting great word of mouth, and it is kind of growing in the places that it was intended to.
I feel like your film is something that can really grow and blossom the way Moonlight did.
I really hope so. Yeah, there are these examples of like the Moonlight, or the Green Book even had that's obviously controversial in another way, but it had a kind of slow start and then it got bigger. And there are many examples of movies that kind of, have kind of grown and blossomed and, like you say, found their champions and found the people. But what I find so interesting is that the audience who we made this film for, absolutely, and kind of like are proud to kind of have as our passionate audience, aren't necessarily like online or on Twitter or anything. So that's the other thing.
That is the other thing. That's the other obstacle for you. It's true. Okay, so I'm sorry. I could like, oh, and let me just talk about this. But the one thing that I have to ask you, because my mother will not forgive me if I do not, which is, what was it like to work with Pam Grier?
Oh my God. She is absolutely incredible. I mean, to have her, and it's not, it's an ensemble piece. So Diane, Keaton and Jackie Weaver's characters are very much the kind of leads, and then the rest is an ensemble. And so it's such an honor that she would even consider to, be in this film in that capacity, because how legendary she is. And you know what? She's the most humble. When I first spoke to her from day one, she was like, I'm in. Yeah, she started texting me pictures of cheerleaders from the 60s and like ideas for songs that we could dance to and stuff. She just really loved the idea, and she thinks that Diane Keaton is like her spirit sister. She's got this whole thing where she, like, on her bucket list, she wanted to meet Diane Keaton. So that obviously helped us massively. But in terms of working with her, she's just honestly, like, she emailed the production assistants in the office to say thank you for arranging her flights, and that, I mean, that's the kind of woman. She really is, like, humble, so talented, so kind of soulful. She lives like half the time like on a she has like horses on a ranch that she like looks after. She's humbling to be around because she's so talented, but you don't feel like in any way, oh, I'm working with movie icon Pam Grier. That's kind of how I felt with her, anyway. She just same with Diane as well, but they have this kind of place in the history of cinema, right, in the 20th century. And, they just keep on working and doing the job, and like are committed to making the best of every day, and like doing what they can do and moving forward, and they just love acting. She exemplified that. I think she told me she really enjoyed playing Olive, her character, because she's very kind of soft and feminine and softly spoken, and that was her take on that character. And she does like tango dancing with her husband in the movie, and she's sort of quite floaty and feminine in she really sort of brought that to the table, and she really wanted that. And again, like, people, I think it's surprising to people because it's like original action star Pam Grier, in a floaty dress, but why not? That's the other thing. It's like, that's what we're trying to do with the film. It's like, well, she's always kind of wanted to do that, and she enjoyed doing it, and she loved it. But I'd love to work with her again. She's a really special human being, I think.
That's awesome. I love that she had a bucket list item that you were able to provide her with. That's dope.
Diane Keaton was on my bucket list. She was like, she doesn't know this, but we were separated at birth. And she told Diane that, and Diane thought it was hilarious.
Well, that's terrific. So where can people find the movie and find out more information about the movie?
It's currently on wide release in the US, and it's basically going to roll out around the world, the theatrical distribution. And the best way to find out about it is probably social media, #POMS movie.
And how do people follow your career after this?
Probably the Twitter or Instagram at Zara, Zar Hayes, Hayes. So just at Zara Hayes. They can find me on there.
Okay, I'm going to tease you for a second because you said the Twitter.
The Twitter.
I'm guessing that she's not really on Twitter, guys.
On that thing called the internet. I am ready, I promise.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the film. You guys should definitely check it out. I do think that you'll be pleasantly surprised no matter what your expectations are. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Directing Magic with Marquette Jones. Be sure to visit directingmagic.com for past episodes and other information relating to the show. Also, be sure to subscribe and rate and comment on iTunes. Until next time, bye-bye.